Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I'm going to work on another one of those reels that Scott brought in. Scott did some fishing reel flea market searches and finding, and well, we have one today. It's he got it because it's just kind of an interesting brand. It's called the Winfield Spinfisher 77. I always think that's interesting because Penn has the Spinfisher as well. And well, this one I think is a generic trade reel. It's a nice condition. There's some bangs and dents and the like on the case, but overall the paint is held up, and it's marked Hong Kong. One of the reel manufacturers that used to have their reels made in Hong Kong was Gladding, and South Bend Gladding. So I'm wondering if this isn't probably the same reel, just branded for Winfield. This one does have an interesting little feature to it. If you look at the side of it here, if you pull back on the bail trip arm, it will collapse the bail and get it out of the way for safe transit and transportation. You won't have to worry about bending that or knocking it. So we're going to take this reel apart. We'll see how it's made. We'll show you the mechanics behind it, show you how to service one if you happen to have it. And well, if you enjoy these kinds of videos, I'm going to recommend that you subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please use that notification button. That'll help you see when I'm posting videos, and if you like, you can watch the videos as they show up, because I work on all kinds of reels, saltwater, freshwater, and everything in between. And well, if you're liking that hobby, I encourage you to do just that, to subscribe. We start by taking off the exterior parts. I took off the star adjuster, or the drag adjuster knob. The spool comes off next. Then there's a little spool adjuster height washer there, and there is a click ratchet underneath. Next part up we want to do is remove the handle. Of course, this has just got a single plate access, which means that this handle screws on. And so what we want to do is turn this opposite the way that it is reeling. So in that case, you're going to turn it in a clockwise manner to remove the handle. The handle has a screw and a washer on it. If the washer falls off, be aware that it belongs there. And that's always a good place for me to tell you to take pictures as you service your reel. The reason for that is if you get lost along the way, well, there's not many guides and things that are going to help you find out how to service a Winfield Spinfisher 77. So I would encourage you to take that picture as a reference point when you're at critical junctures, so that if you do lose your way, you can go back to the pictures, refer to the milestones where you took those pictures, and maybe gather your thoughts or get you back on track. All right, we've removed the 3 side plate screws. That should enable us to remove the side plate. Very much looks like a South Bend reel underneath. And one of the things we want to do right now, we want to disengage the anti-reverse dog on the back of this case. If you leave that attached and you start removing the main gear and the like, you're going to have an issue here with possibly knocking that off. If you knock that off, you're going to have, well, let's just call it a good mental exercise in terms of trying to figure out how to put it back together again. All right, we remove the screw that goes into the cross block, and now we should pull up on that axle shaft and out. So this reel is suffering from what a lot of old reels that haven't been used in a while are suffering from. It's dried grease. I call it grease choked, but the reality of that is, if it doesn't get used, gravity happens. When gravity happens, it all puddles to one side or the other, up, down, or sideways, depending on how the reel is laying. And well, it starts to tighten up, congeal, and when it does that, all of a sudden it becomes just hard to move. And if it becomes hard to move, that's like sludge in an engine. And once it becomes hard to use, you got to work harder to get that done, and eventually something is going to break. This one has a E-clip that's holding on the rotor, so after you remove that axle shaft, you can just separate that E-clip or C-clip and pull that out. Notice that that clip has got a slight bow to it. It's not a flat clip. That's to hold tension in the slot. If you happen to have one of these reels with the C-clip and the rotor rocks an awful lot, you can gently pry back the bend to restore the tension and tighten up on the movement there. Okay, next up then, we want to pull the rotor up and out, just like this. And now we can push the main gear through. And you're going to notice in this reel that there are no bearings in this reel. And, well, there's basically no bushings in the reel either. The reel side plates are machined on the one side that holds the main gear. It is not a bushing. The side case acts as the bushing for this. So on the scheme of things in terms of where this is as a reel, it was a less expensive reel because they've eliminated the ball bearings, they've eliminated the bushings, they've pretty much gone to a very simple design. And you know what? Simple designs sometimes are the most effective depending on where you're fishing the reel. And in this case, this is going to be for a riverbank, probably handling fish maybe up to, I don't know, 5 to 10 pounds max maybe. It's capable of doing that. And you just got to keep it tuned up and it'll do just fine. I took off most of the old grease by either scraping it with a screwdriver and then using a penetrating oil to loosen it. Now I want to check the teeth on the main gear, making sure that they're all uniform and clean. And do it from this side too. Make sure they all have their peaks on it. I was just working on a pen conflict the other day, and the front looked okay, but when I looked to the side, they were well worn, and that was causing erratic movement on the gear itself. Once you check the teeth, if there are any deposits in there, any residual old greases that we didn't wipe out the other way, use a hard brush to pull through and clear that channel. Inspect the back, and then we can relube and reset that after we clean the case here. The case is pretty clean. I think what's happened here is that we have some dried grease, and that dried grease kind of clogged the axle shaft from going up and down, but it didn't spread out throughout the case. So minimum cleanup needed there. And next up then, we're just going to put a little bit of grease back onto the shoulder of that shaft, and we're going to grease the main gear and reinsert that. If you have any questions on this reel or any reel, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, maybe you just want to learn a little bit more about the fishing reel, maybe you want to learn about trade reels or something, if you leave those questions in the comment section, I will try to answer those questions for you. I don't know all the answers, but if I do, I'll try and help you out with that. Reinsert the gear in. Again, that anti-reverse dog is in the off position. This one, if you wanted to, I guess you could remove your pinion gear, which is attached to the rotor, but there's no reason to, unless you find that it's damaged or something, and maybe if you got lucky and had a replacement, you could do that. For the most part, you can leave this just as it is. I'm doing the same thing I did here to the main gear. I'm cleaning out all the channels of the teeth. I'm inspecting the channels. If there's a little bit of dried grease in there, just pulling a wire brush through. And I keep a paper towel on the table. That way, as I pull the debris out, you'll see some flecking going on here. I will make sure that it lands on the towel and not my workbench, so that I can safely dispose of that without transferring it to my next project. A little bit of grease onto the teeth for the gear, and then a little bit of grease. There is a bushing in here. You can see that bushing spinning around. So a little bit of grease into the bushing for that top mount. Once you've cleaned up and re-lubed your rotor, we can go start to reinstall. There was a washer that goes on the back end of the main gear, and then we can take the grease up the shaft of the main gear, if we haven't done that already, and let's go reinsert that in. Make sure it seats all the way low. Make sure you have grease on all surfaces of that gear, except the back. You don't need the grease where the click ratchet goes through. And then we'll take our bail assembly with the rotor. I'm going to bring that down, and then we will align the clip into the groove on both sides of the pinion gear and make sure that it seats firmly. Now that piece is going to be held in place by the side plate, so it won't pop out. While we have this up, make sure that you oil your trip mechanism. Make sure you oil the seams, and you can put a drop of oil over here, even though it's what I'll call the dead end. All right, let's go ahead and take that handle, put that back on so that we can hold the main gear in place. And remember that the handle is going to go on in a counterclockwise manner, because that's the direction that this reel will be spinning. This reel cannot be changed over to an opposite side retrieve. It's one directional only, and it's a left-hand crank. Let's grab our crosswind block, make sure that we had it cleaned. And when you go to install your crosswind block, make sure that the screw for that crosswind block connection to the axle shaft, the hole is below on the mount. If you had a question about that, go back to your pictures. If you didn't have a question on it and you mounted it upside down, what will happen is that that stud on the bottom will bump the pinion gear up top, and your reel will not go round and round. Insert your axle shaft after a light grease. Align the hole in the axle shaft with the hole in the crosswind block, and then get that flathead screw, which is going to tie the two together. And then give it a crank. You'll see how that reel works, and it turns nice and smooth now, as I would expect it to, given that everything's been cleaned and greased. Just need to put our side plate back on. And 3 small screws to hold that in, and then we'll service that spool, and we'll have this one back to Scott to take fishing again. So Scott's been finding an awful lot of interesting reels at local flea markets in the Southern California area. Flea markets are a great place to find used equipment, and if you're interested in a hobby, it's a great place to find some inexpensive reels to start taking them apart, seeing how they are made, learning how to service them, kind of no risk. If you happen to error along the way and you lose a piece or a part, or you can't get it back together again, or it's not working, well, I call that the price of tuition. So if you can pick these reels up for $5, $10, whatever, and learn from them, well, then all is not lost if all did not go well. All right, got that on nice and tight. I wanted to tighten that up a little bit more. And let's just take one look at the spool before we finish this. You have a drag stack in here. It's probably going to be Teflon washers, could be felt washers. They're held in place by a retaining clip. That retaining clip sits in a groove, and it's a spring clip, so be aware of that. Next up, we can pull those out. It's kind of got an interesting set here. Never quite seen this set, but that's okay. The first one in is an eared washer to provide a flat surface for the washer to sit on, and also to hold the spool firm. Next one up is a tension ring that would go on top of your metal washer. Next one up then would be your round washer. And then this is a plastic washer, so that will go next. And we're going to top it off with the other angled washer. And then bring the clip back in. Most of the time you can get these clips in by hand. Sometimes you may need a little assist. Just hold to one side so it doesn't shoot, and then apply pressure as you walk it around inside the clip. And I'm just using the flat blade of a screwdriver to pull it in. and making sure that it seats properly. So it doesn't have a lot of max drag on it. And when you go to set this now, there is a tooth on one of those washers that needs to fit into a groove. All right, well, set it all the way down. Put your drag adjuster knob back on. Tighten it down to make sure that your drag is holding. It is, and then back it off a little bit. And that's it. That's how you service this reel. Again, this is the Winfield Spinfisher 77, probably made by the same company that's made the Gladding South Bend reels in the 1980s. And that's how you keep it going, how to service it, and how to take it fishing again next week if you like. Just flip your click back on, make sure that your anti-reverse is working, which it is, and your service is basically complete. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you continue to watch. Please subscribe, as we noted. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is you do to keep us safe. And to everybody, have a great day on the water, a great day fishing, a great day repairing reels, or just plain a great day. Enjoy it. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.